Okay, I think we should make a start. Good evening. Thank you for joining. We are talking about the month of Iyar, and Iyar is complicated principally because it is a month which connects two major events. So whenever you have the almost like the down period in the middle, so you wonder, what is that supposed to represent? What does it mean? That's one aspect of Iyar that's complicated in the sense that it's that down point between Pesach and Shavuos. But on the other hand, the other reason why Iyar is very complicated is because Iyar is a month which has adopted a different identity, if you like, over the years. The reality is that this was the happiest time of the year. Between Pesach and Shavuos is the time of the harvest. It's the time when this was the most celebratory time of the year. And yet, because of the nature of events that occurred during this time, we have the death of the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva, the students of Rabbi Akiva. We have the most horrific incidences of the events during the time of the Crusades, which took place mainly during the Sphira period. So it's also adopted, because of the various practices of mourning that are adopted during this time, it's taken on quite a different identity as a result. I just want to read you a few lines from Rav Hirsch, who I think really puts this very, very beautifully in one of his essays on the month of Iyar. He says, when we gather together in peaceful houses of God in the early summer evening hours to count our days and weeks until the joyful day of our Torah festival, we probably reflect very little on the completely different circumstances and atmosphere under which our fathers once counted these days. How often did they begin the counting and then wonder whether they would live to complete the counting at all? And if so, where they would complete it? How often did the howling mob throw the burning torch into unobtrusive houses of God, drive communities out of their peaceful dwellings, murder, rob, plunder, burn? This was done in the name of a faith which owes the basics of its belief to that very people against whom they drew the sword. This was the nature of the experience that so many of our ancestors had to undergo during this time. And still, he carries on, the fathers proceeded with their counting from the time of the offering of the sheaves up to the time of the Torah festival, glad to be able to bring all of their sheaves to the Torah as an offering. They would abandon their sheaves, in inverted commas, to torch and pillage, if only they might be able to rescue the sacred Torah and save themselves and their belongings for Torah. They were engulfed by a dark century of mania and frenzy, lit only by the glare of their flaming homes and by the fires of the stakes prepared for them. They lifted their eyes in prayer, calmly and confidently to the ruler of time, to Hashem, the God of their fathers, with only one wish, that it might please him to rebuild the temple of Yerushalayim speedily and in their days, to grant them their portion in his Torah. He carries on by saying, the times will become brighter, thoughts more enlightened, feelings more humane. No longer do dungeons and death at the stake await the Jew who wants to live and die in loyalty to his divine law. And then he goes on to talk about the fact that the need to be Moseh Nefesh, self-sacrifice for Hashem and his Torah, in the literal sense, no longer exists. Do we therefore have nothing more to learn from our fathers who are ready to make such sacrifices? It's difficult in a way to read these words of Rav Hirsch because, of course, he's writing in mid-19th century Germany, hoping and imagining that they had put all that behind them, which, of course, as we know now, tragically, of course, they had not. But nevertheless, what we see from here is the fact that what I think we need to do with the month of Iyar is understand the connection of the counting to the Omer, what that means, what that really represents, and what the days themselves, the counting, is meant to achieve. What are we meant to achieve with these days? What is the purpose? What is their purpose? What was the original purpose, if you like, of the days of the Omer before they adopted in that aspect of the mourning aspect, which was later? What was the original idea of these days? The difficulty we have, in a way, is the fact that if you look at the Torah, it's a complex picture. It's a complex picture because it's clear that the counting is bound up with this Omer, with the Korban Omer. The Torah says in Parshas Emor, Ki sovoyu el haaretz, asher ani nosein lochem, u'ktartem es ketziro, you'll harvest, v'haveisem es omer eshis ketzirechem la'kohen. You're going to bring the omer, which is the first of your harvest, to the kohen, and you'll wave the omer l'fnei Hashem l'ritzonchem, Mimocharas HaShabbos Yinifenu HaKohen. And the Kohen has to bring this Omer offering is brought Mimocharas HaShabbos, which we understand, Chazal understand to mean it is the day after the first day of Pesach. So they would harvest it on Motzei Yom Tov. It's not Motzei Shabbos, it means the first day of Yom Tov, and it was brought the next day. And then the Torah carries on to describe the korbanos that were brought on this day together with the Omer offering, the Korban Omer. And then the Torah says, Usvartem lochem mimocharas hashabbos. You shall count from the next day, miyom haviechem es omer tnufa, after you've brought this Omer offering, Sheva Shabbosos to Mimos Dieno, 7 complete weeks. Ad mimocharas hashabbos hashvius, until the end of the 7th week, Tisbru Chamishim, we count 50 days. Vehikraftem and Chochad Shol Hashem, and then you bring a new korban to Hashem, and then he goes on to describe that was the korban of the Shtei Halechem, the special korban of the 2 loaves that was brought on Shavuos. So there is the fact that clearly there is this connection. This is the connection that exists between the counting itself and the Korban Omer. That's why it's called Sefiras HaOmer, the counting of the Omer. So we need to understand what that is. And we also need to understand what exactly the connection is between the counting and the fact that it takes place immediately after leaving Egypt and after Yetzias Mitzrayim. There is clearly that connection between Pesach and Shavuos, and the Omer and the counting is meant to do that. But we have to understand in a deeper way, what is that continuation in terms of the aim and the ambition, the ideals of Yetzias Mitzrayim. Because you have to remember that this is beginning the day after. So it's directly after Pesach. It must have a message within it, which is meant to keep alive the message itself of Yetzias Mitzrayim, of leaving Mitzrayim. So to try and understand the basics of what this, what is involved in this mitzvah, we'll just begin by looking at the Sefer HaChinuch. The Sefer HaChinuch is a classic work on, we don't exactly know who the author is of the Sefer HaChinuch, but he's one of the Rishonim, one of the early commentators, very, very important and classic work. And he provides, or attempts to provide, a basis, a rationale, an understanding for the mitzvahs as a whole. I think, share the screen here to try and, there we go. Yeah, you should be able to see that. So I can, just to see, you can see inside the words of the Sefer HaChinuch. So let's look carefully at what he says in understanding this mitzvah. He says, Mishrosh mitzvah al tzad pshat. You want to understand the simple explanation as to why this mitzvah exists. The essence of who we are as a people is the Torah itself. Everything was created, the Jewish people, everything, heaven, earth, it's all because of the Torah itself, as the Pasuk says in Yirmiyahu, Imlo Brisi Yom V'Laylo, etc., etc. If not for my covenant day and night. That's why we were redeemed. So they should receive the Torah on Har Sinai and fulfill it. As Hashem says to Moshe, this will be the sign for you that I have sent you. When you send out the people from Mitzrayim, at the very beginning, when Moshe Rabbeinu is sent on his journey, he is said, Hashem says to him, this is the sign that I have sent you. When you take the people out of Mitzrayim, you will serve Hashem on this mountain. In other words, Har Sinai. That will be a sign for you. That itself will be a sign for you that you will worship Hashem on this mountain. So, Koloma means that why are they being redeemed? They're being redeemed to receive the Torah. That's the whole purpose. And we don't have to do all of it inside, but he basically carries on to say that clearly, if the Exodus, if the leaving Egypt, the sign, that is a sign for receiving the Torah on Har Sinai, clearly the primary aim is the receiving of the Torah itself. He says, and therefore, it is the whole purpose of the Jewish people. Uba'avura nigalu, and that's why they were exiled. That's why they were redeemed. Sorry, Va'olu l'chola gudula she'olu eleh, and that's why they received all of the greatness that they achieved. Nitztavina, I'm just 3 lines from the end of the page here. Nitztavina, we were commanded limnos to count. Mimocharas Yom Tov shel Pesach ad Yom Nesinas HaTorah. That's why we were commanded to count from the day after the Yom Tov of Pesach, the first day Pesach, until the giving of the Torah. Laharos b'nafshenu, to demonstrate, to show in our souls, hachifetz hagodol el hayom hanichbat hanichsaf lelibenu, to show this great desire that we have for this key day. Ke'eved yishof tzeil, just like a servant desires, wishes to achieve shade. V'yimne tomid mosa yovo ha'es hanichsav ilav she'yitzel lecheres. Right? He's always counting the days that he will go free. Ki haminyan mareh la'odom. What is counting? It demonstrates to a person everything he wants is to get to that time. We count to something if we're really desperate to get to it. And this that we count to the Omer, we say so and such days have passed from the counting. We don't say these are the days that are left. He calls him that shows how much we desire to reach that day. And therefore he says, we don't want to mention how many days are left. We don't want to say, well, we've got a long way to go. We don't want to highlight the fact that it's a long way to go because we are desperate to get there. That is, and he carries on to say, he says, okay, let's skip out a few lines here. Right, a few lines, so 2 lines into the second paragraph. Ve'im tishal, if you're going to ask, im kain, if so, why do we begin it from the next day, the day after the Yom Tov? Why not the first day? Why don't we start that count from the very first day? The answer is, the first day, that first day, is entirely dedicated to the great miracle of Yetzias Mitzrayim itself. That is a sign, a wonder on the renewal of the world, and the direct involvement of Hashem, looking after His people, looking after the people of the world in general. We don't want to mix in any other simcha with that day. And therefore, that's why we begin from the second day, because you've got to be careful not to mix up the two together. Now, what you see from his question here is there is a very deep connection between the first day of Pesach and the counting of the Sfiras HaOmer and the offering of the Omer itself. Because really, he's saying, we should have done it, we should have brought it on the very first day. We should have brought that Korban HaOmer from which we count from, right, on the first day. But we don't really do that. We don't do that because we want to make sure that we don't mix up one simcha with another simcha. And he says, he says, well, you see this also clearly in the next piece, which is the Sefer HaChinuch explaining the mitzvah of the Korban Omer itself. What is this Korban for? He says, Mishrashi HaMitzvah, again, the roots of the mitzvah is the great kindness that Hashem does with His creations. Every year, once again, the produce renews itself. We're able to harvest that year's crops. That's why we offer it to Hashem. So we should remember and mention His kindness and His goodness to us before we benefit from it. Because we are fitting to be blessed through thinking and preparing our actions in the right way in front of Hashem. Therefore, our produce is blessed as a result of that, and Hashem wishes and desires what we do as a result. Because Hashem's ultimate desire is to give kindness, to bring kindness to His creations. And then he repeats again, "V'nitztavinu b'zeh b'sheni shel Pesach v'lo b'rishon." We only do it on the second day of Pesach, not the first day. That means the korban of the Omer is only brought on the second day. Kedei shelo na'arev simcha b'simcha. So you don't end up mixing one simcha with another. Ki orishon nochon lezecher hanes hagodol she'etzion baruch hu mi'avdos lacheres. Because the first one is correct to mention the great miracle that he took us out from slavery to freedom. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we don't mix up the two. We don't mix up one simcha with another. The first one is to mention the great miracle that we left Egypt. And the second one is the deeper and in a way harder to feel and to sense, the idea of the great miracle that Hashem renews our crops every single year. Now, this is a very, very important point, because if you, in a way, gets to the heart of the connection and what Sfiras HaOmer, the counting of the Omer, and why it's linked to the korban of the Omer, what it's meant to achieve. So Chaim Friedlander, Chaim Friedlander was a mashgiach. He was mashgiach of the Ponevezh Yeshiva. He was one of the prime students of Rav Dessler, and he has a classic work on the Yomim Tovim, and he explains there the following idea. He says like this. He says, before we benefit from that new crop, the new grain every year, we want to develop within ourselves a sense that everything is from Hashem and it's all due to his kindness. Just like we say, you're not allowed to have benefit from this world without a bracha, without making a bracha first. So too, we have the same idea is behind the korban ha'omer, the korban omer. We bring this korban as if to say, because Hashem has granted us this ability, this grace, we understand and recognize it's only because of Hashem's goodness that we are able to do so. That we are able to benefit because we understand that it's all from Hashem Himself. So, how does this link, though, to Yetzias Mitzrayim, to leaving Egypt? So we understand that as the Sefer HaChinuch is telling us, the primary message of the Korban HaOmer is to understand that as the crop renews itself each year, we recognize that is a gift from Hashem. As the Chinuch says on that third line in the source 3, just like you make a bracha before you eat something, so too we bring that korban ha'omer, we bring the korban of the beginning of the crops, so that we understand and recognize that it's due to Hashem's goodness, right? It was a barley offering. We understand that Hashem is giving us that ability. And what does that connect? How does that connect to leaving Egypt? How do all these things link together? And for this, Rabbi Chaim Friedlander says, you need to understand the process. We have to understand the process of Yetzias Mitzrayim, of leaving Egypt itself. There were three stages to Yetzias Mitzrayim. The first stage is the exile itself, the period of exile itself. And that, he says, we find compared to the idea of he compares each of these three stages to the process of childbirth. So that the first stage, the exile itself, is compared to the time of pregnancy. It is the time when the Jewish people are almost, so to speak, they're within the womb. They are within the nation of Mitzrayim themselves, of Egypt themselves, and they are going through and undergoing this process that will eventually lead to their birth as a nation. But at the moment, everything is concealed. They're inside as the fetus is within the womb. They're entirely concealed. The second stage, of course, is the birth itself. It's the Yetzias Mitzrayim. And the Torah itself directly, this is what is in source 4 here, directly tells us that is what Yetzias Mitzrayim, what leaving Egypt was. And Moshe Rabbeinu is beautifully telling the Bnei Yisrael, understand and recognize what has happened here, what you have undergone. Has Hashem ever done this before, to take out one nation from within another nation? Those words, goy mikerev goy, means a nation that was inside another one. There you see this idea of the birth of the nation. And it carries on, we quote this pasuk in the Haggadah, with great wonders and miracles and war, etc., etc. This is the second This is the second stage. This is the process, the moment of the birth itself. Now, this stage was a very difficult stage. They were, as we know, we phrase it in the way that they were deeply, they had become submerged into the Torah of Mitzrayim, and that wasn't just a physical slavery they had learned from, they had absorbed negative spiritual influences as well. And therefore, to leave Mitzrayim was a difficult process. And the entire process of leaving Mitzrayim, of becoming free, was a process of, by definition, something defined by miracles. It was defined in an entirely miraculous way. The way Chaim Friedlander phrases it is like this. The freedom itself became sort of engraved within them. And every other exile subsequently is only external. Because he's quoting the Maharal, because the moment they believe Mitzrayim, they become B'nai Chorin. They are now defined as free people. And they may be subjugated, and they were subjugated time and time again, that they were never more defined as avodim, as servants. Now, the issue, however, is that freedom was on a miraculous level. It was a miraculous plane. It was a gift from Hashem. The Mechilta de Rabbi Yishmael in Beshalach brings this out so powerfully. At the sea, Zeh Keli v'anvehu, they saw Hashem's presence. Rabbi Lezer Omer, Menayin ata Omer sherat hashivcha le'ayom ma'ashelo roa Yeshaya v'Chezkel. A shivcha, even an ordinary maidservant on the sea, by the sea, saw that which Yeshaya and Chezkel, the Nevi'im, were not able to see. And he brings various psukim which describe the way the Nevi'im only saw things through a parable or a vision. They weren't able to see things directly. Modern Hebrew is like a siren. So there's all these people and this noise around him. The Giborim Yimino Mismoilo, and there are mighty warriors on either side. The Chayolos Melefonov, and there is warriors, his soldiers in front of him and behind him. Everyone's asking, which one is the king? He is flesh and blood like them. They're not sure who exactly is the king. When Hashem reveals himself by the sea, they didn't need to ask who the king was. As soon as they saw, they knew exactly who he was. And they all said, "This is my God, and I will glorify him." How is it possible that everyone, whatever spiritual level they were, whatever stage, they could all see more than the greatest Nevi'im, the greatest prophets we've ever had? And the answer is because it was a gift. It was a gift from heaven. It was a gift from Shemayim. It wasn't something they had worked on themselves. And that's how even the youngest and the smallest could take part in the Shiur, in the song that was sung after crossing the Yam Suf. You see, a Novi, the way Reb Chaim Friedland explains it, is that a Novi, a prophet, will see something because he spent time working. He or she has spent time working on themselves and purifying themselves in their service of Hashem. And the great reward they would get at the time of when prophecy we had Nevi'im was to have that vision and that connection, that communication from Hashem. When Yechezkel achieves that, he achieves it through his own efforts in that way. Yetzias Mitzrayim is different. Yetzias Mitzrayim, it's a gift from above. So it makes no difference who the person is. It doesn't make no difference the effort they've put in. Hashem gives it as a gift from above. The difficulty is that is something which can't last. It exists at the moment that it's given, but what happens subsequently to that? And therefore, that's why you come to the third stage of Yetzias Mitzrayim. What is the third stage of leaving Egypt? The third stage of leaving Egypt is the days between Yetzias Mitzrayim and Kabbalas HaTorah, receiving the Torah. That is the days of counting Mimocharas HaShabbos. Why? Because after the child is born, the child has to grow up. Everything they received at the time of the Exodus of leaving Mitzrayim, that's the gift. That's the gift from Hashem. How do you make that kinyan? How do you acquire it within you? Only by working on yourself. Only by working on oneself, taking that sudden spiritual elevation that we achieved when we left Egypt, that's not going to last. That's not going to last. It's going to fade. It's going to fade like anything else that happens, any momentary flash of inspiration. We've all been there so many times. It can't last. You feel amazing for a moment, but then the next day, life carries on. The difficulty is ensuring that one is able to stay at that level. Beautiful posuk in Tehillim. We say, Mi yaleh bahar Hashem u'mi yakum bimkom kodshay. Who can ascend the mountain of Hashem? That's the sudden going up the mountain. That moment when you climb the top of a mountain and you see the incredible views. A gift. It's amazing. It's incredible. Our challenge is to stay at that place in a spiritual sense, to stay at that level, to fix that within us. That's something which takes the 49 days of the Sphira itself, proceeding, getting towards Matan Torah, so that we work on ourselves during those days in order to arrive at that moment where we can receive the Torah. Now, the point here is that we do this through beginning with Yetzias Mitzrayim, but what we do when we get to the next day, directly after that moment of Yetzias Mitzrayim, the next day, we now see and we now try immediately to take that vision and the ideas of these wondrous, incredible miracles and bring it directly into our daily lives to try and reveal the miraculous within the natural order of things. And that is why the very next day, the Torah tells us, bring the Korban Ha'omer. Bring a Korban which is designed for one purpose, to recognize Hashem in the natural world. Medrash says, this is Surah 6, person normally buys a piece of meat from the shuk, from the marketplace. Takes so long, it takes so much time, it's so much hassle until you prepare the meat. And nevertheless, we all go to sleep. Hashem makes the wind blow, and he makes the clouds form. He causes the crops to grow. He ripens the fruit. And all he asks from us is simply this one small korban ha'omer, this small korban, which is just designed to recognize that it's because of the gift of Hashem. It's Hashem's direct involvement in the natural world, just as he was directly involved in a miraculous level in Yetzias Mitzrayim, that we're able to enjoy our lives and we're able to consume the crops for the coming year. That's what it means, says the Medrash, when it says, you bring the omer, which is the beginning of your harvest, to the kohen itself. We understand and recognize that everything comes from Hashem. The Medrash carries on and says, Surah 7, Omer Rabbi Birnbaum, Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu LeMoshe. Rabbi Birnbaum says, Hashem said to Moshe, Leichem olahem Yisrael, go and say to the Bnei Yisrael, Kesher yisi nosen lechem es hamon, when I would give you the mon, yisi nosen omer lechol echad ve'echad mikem. When I gave you the mon, when the mon descended from heaven, I gave an omer to each individual. That's what it means when it says omer lagulgolas. Every person received an omer. And now, that same measure, all I'm asking is one omer from all of you. All of the Bnei Yisrael have to bring the one omer. I'm not even asking for wheat. I'm just asking for barley. That's all. Not very expensive. Therefore, you make sure you bring the omer. The point is that it's not complicated. It is something which is one omer from all of the people, and it's barley, and it's not even wheat, because it's there as a symbol. It's a recognition of the fact that we understand that just as Hashem interacts in a miraculous way with leaving Mitzrayim, so too in our daily lives, in everything we have in our day-to-day life, it is also directly from Hashem. And that is why it is specifically within the context of the days of the harvest, which begin with Pesach. A person could be tempted during these days, during the month of Iyar, a person could be tempted to think, I've done it all myself. It's all my efforts that have led to these incredible crops. That's why during these days specifically, the Torah tells us to ingrain within us, to make sure that we understand and internalize the fact that this is directly from Hashem himself. Once we have that moment of recognition that everything is from Hashem, we understand that even Teva is a miracle, that even the natural order is a miracle. Everything is from Hashem. Everything depends on Hashem's will. Hashem willed it that we should leave Mitzrayim through a miraculous means, and Hashem decides that the crops should grow. It's a beautiful thing, that in the days that in Nisan we make the bracha on the blossoms as well. It's that renewal, or that annual renewal, that annual bracha that we make, the annual sense of renewal, that once again the world has returned to its natural order, that once again there is life, and life grows once more. Rav Dessler says a very profound and beautiful idea. It's something which I think when you hear these words, it can change a whole part of your davening. We mention Gevuros Geshamim in Tchias HaMesim, right? We mention Mashiv Ruach, obviously in the winter, in the bracha of Tchias HaMesim. The second bracha of Amida, the bracha is Mechayeh HaMesim. What's the connection? It says like this. The connection is like this. The Tchias HaMesim, the resurrection of the dead, everyone understands that's the ultimate nes, the ultimate miracle for the dead to come back to life. An incredible, the pinnacle of all miracles. The growing of crops, that's the most natural thing in the world. That's the most ordinary thing, the thing we just take for granted. The point is that when one is a thoughtful person, one sees that, in fact, the two are one and the same. That actually, when we look at the way the crops grow, we look at the way Hashem makes them and leads them to grow, and every part of that process, we understand that the fact that you can have a seed in the ground which rots and then somehow creates a new growth from that seed, it's an amazing thing. That's new life. That is new life. That is the resurrection of the dead. And therefore, we connect the most extreme example of a miraculous event, Tchias HaMesim, and in the same bracha we talk about Gevuros Geshamim, how Hashem makes the wind blow and the rain to fall, because it's all the same. It's all a miracle. It's all a nes. It's so powerful to bring those two things together. I think that idea really changes something we don't even think about when we daven. It's so powerful. We're saying everything's a nes. This is exactly the same idea as Sfiras HaOmer itself is meant to encourage us to develop and to understand. Now, when we look further in this medrash, we have another the medrash there also. It's all the same medrash in Parshas Emor on the idea on the Sfiras HaOmer and the Korban HaOmer. Tani Rabbi Chia, source 8. Sheva Shabbosos Temimos Tiyena. There are 7 complete weeks. Says the medrash, Eimosai Temimos. When are they complete? Bizman Yisrael Osin Ratzon Hashem Lakom. When the Bnei Yisrael do the will of Hashem. What does that mean? The completeness of the sphere itself, that is the completion of a person with Hashem. When we understand when we do the will of Hashem, that's what makes it complete. Completeness doesn't just mean 7 complete weeks. It really means the perfection of the person doing the counting. That's the ultimate purpose of the perfection. The pasuk means Sheva Shabbosos Tmimos Tiyena, 7 complete weeks. But the real perfection, what's the real perfection? What's the real completeness in this pasuk? The real completeness is the person who is Sholem B'Ma'asov. He is completed. The person, he or she, is complete in their actions, and that comes through understanding that ultimately Hashem is in control and Hashem is running everything. Friedlander points out that Chazal here specifically used the phrase mokum, Ritzona shel mokum, the will of Hashem. When we use the word mokum, it means that the word can be understood. We've brought other explanations in the past, but the way he understands it here in this context is the word mokum is the same as mekayem, the one who establishes, the one who is always, who is guiding everything in creation. That's the essential message of what the Omer itself is trying to achieve, what it is meant to deliver. And finally, we have the Ramban. The Ramban says in Parshas Emor, Hashem commanded Chag HaMatzos with 7 days, it begins with Kedusha and ends with Kedusha. They're all holy and Hashem is within them. You get 49 days, 7 weeks. And then the 8th day is sanctified like the 8th day of Sukkot. There's a comparison there. He brings this idea here that when we count the days between Pesach and Shavuos, it's the same idea as if we are in a period of Chol HaMoed in Sukkot. We have the 7 days of Sukkot, and you get to Shmini Atzeres on the 8th day. You have the 7 weeks after that first day of Pesach until the day of the giving of the Torah. We're in this period of Chol HaMoed that just lasts 7 weeks. It lasts 7 weeks, doesn't last 7 days. And therefore he says, Chag HaShavuos Atzeres. That's why Shavuos is called Atzeres. Ki hu yom kishmi, ki hu ki yom shmini shel chag, shekora kosev kain. Very, very beautiful idea. What is the similarity? Because Shmini Atzeres, and it is called Shmini Atzeres, the day when we held back, the extra day when Hashem says, don't leave, stay for one more day. Shavuos is the parallel to Shmini Atzeres. Shavuos is the quote-unquote 8th day, 8th as in the 50th day after the 7 weeks, the 49 days of the Omer, when we have that ultimate fulfillment, the ultimate connection with Hashem that we arrive at as a result of the 49 days. So what we really tried to develop here, based on these ideas of Reb Chaim Friedlander, is that the whole process of Pesach, of Yetzias Mitzrayim, of absorbing and understanding the miraculous, needs to be seen in the context of the process of a birth of a child. There's the time when everything is concealed and hidden, the time of pregnancy, and then you have the birth itself. But the birth itself is a gift. It's a gift from Shomayim. But the child needs to develop. The child needs to grow up. You can't remain a baby, a child. Essentially, even at the Yam Suf, it was all a gift. How was it that they were able to see the most incredible miracles, those nissim, those open miracles that even they saw directly, they pointed to Hashem and said, Zeh Keli V'anvehu, something which even the greatest Nevi'im couldn't do. The answer is because it was all a gift from Shemayim. They hadn't worked on it themselves. The next day, the very, very next day after that first day Pesach, on the second day, we bring the Korban HaOmer. We bring the Korban of the Omer, which is Hashem saying to us, all I want you to do is recognize me in your daily lives. Recognize my role, what I'm doing in every aspect of your lives, and that there is no difference between the miraculous nature of leaving Egypt and the miraculous nature of every moment of your lives, of represented especially by the growth of the produce, the crops, right? This is the Omer, is the beginning of the new crops. You bring that Omer, and then you can enjoy the crops of the new crop of that year. When we have that recognition, what we're doing is we're taking the influence of Yetzias Mitzrayim, we're taking the miracles, the level of Hashem operating on a miraculous level, and we're saying we're bringing this into our everyday daily lives. When we're counting days in that way, what we're really doing is we're making the days count. We're ensuring that when we get to the moment of the giving of the Torah on Shavuos, it's not that we are attempting to be there in the same framework and the same mindset that we are on Pesach. No, we are trying to get there on a very different level. We're trying to get there on a level that we have built ourselves spiritually, so that we're not just there on that basic level that we left Mitzrayim. It's all a gift. Hashem has given us these, he's shown us all these miracles and he's doing it all for us. No, once we get to Shavuos, we've internalized the fact that even the most ordinary and mundane things, it's Hashem guiding it. It's the Rotzono Shel Mokem. It's the will of Hashem. When we do that, we make every single day count. Iyar becomes a month of real counting, where it's not a low point, as we started between Pesach and Shavuos. It's not a down point. What it is it's a real Chol HaMoed, as the Ramban says. It's a Chol HaMoed between the beginning point, where it's the gift from Shemayim, it's the gift from heaven, it's the gift of Hashem giving us those miracles, and we see Hashem on a miraculous level. So we arrive at the giving of the Torah, and we've built ourselves up to understand that we can recognize Hashem's role in every single aspect of our lives, and through that, we then merit to receive the Torah itself after achieving that level, after those 49 days. Thank you all very much for joining. Any questions? Any questions? No questions? Don't feel obliged. It's okay.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much, Rabbi.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
That's a pleasure.
May we return to to shul, to normality.
Oh, yeah. And tomorrow, yeah, absolutely. We are beginning. Even tomorrow night, I'm going to be starting the Gemara Shiur again in shul. So hopefully, by to next month, hopefully we'll be able to be back in shul. We may keep a Zoom link open, but I think it will be. Yeah, it's always better in a proper normal setting. Absolutely.
100%. Thank you so much.
Great pleasure. Have a good evening.
I like the idea about a seed has to rot.
Yes, exactly.
Before it flourishes. So we
has to decay, which is the connection to Tchias HaMesim. It's very powerful. There's a decaying aspect, but actually it's for new life. It's a very powerful idea. Absolutely. Yeah. Very good. Okay, Chodesh Tov. Okay, take care. Bye.